Welcome to the Book Show, a celebration of reading and writers. I'm Joe Donahue. CNN anchor-in-chief, Washington correspondent, and New York Times bestselling author Jake Tapper's third thriller, All the Demons Are Here, transports readers to the 1970s underground world of cults, celebrities, tabloid journalism, serial killers, disco, and UFOs. It's 1977. Ike and Lucy, the kids of Senator Charlie and Margaret Martyr, are grown up, and they are in trouble. U.S. Marine Ike has gone AWOL after a military operation gone horribly wrong. Now he's off the grid working on the pit crew for Evel Knievel and hanging in the roughest dive bar in Montana. His sister, meanwhile, Lucy, has become the star reporter of a brand new Washington, D.C. tabloid, breaking stories about a serial killer and falling in with the wealthy, shady British family that owns the newspaper. Jake Tapper has written two New York Times bestselling novels, The Hellfire Club and The Devil May Dance, as well as the bestselling nonfiction book, The Outpost, which was turned into an acclaimed film in 2020. Tapper is the lead D.C. anchor-in-chief Washington correspondent for CNN. Thank you very much for being with us. A pleasure to have you back.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
I love these novels, and what I think is so fascinating about them is that while many authors will go by letters of the alphabet or will go year by year, you seem to be doing decades, and that's fascinating.
Yeah, well, it wasn't planned. The first one I did because I found the McCarthy era fascinating and also particularly resonant during the Trump era. And then when I was just on that book tour and the publisher came back and said they wanted me to write a second one, just randomly, I had learned this amazing story about the Kennedy years where Sinatra had, and this is a true story, Sinatra had been trying to get President Kennedy to stay with him at his Rancho Mirage compound in 1962, as a goodwill gesture, since he had helped Kennedy get elected. And he'd had the estate built out and had a helipad added and all the rest. And the Kennedys had to decide whether or not to do that, since they were worried that Sinatra was mobbed up. And so that was the basis of the second book, just because I had learned that story and had never heard it before. And I was, I'm a pretty big fan of Sinatra and historically interested in the Kennedys. So the first two books were the 50s and the 60s, and so it just kind of made sense that I had to do the 70s next. I was reluctant to do them because I actually was alive for them, and I kind of remember them as pretty lame. But I was told by some folks who were a little bit older, no, you're wrong. Check them out. And boy, were those people right. The 70s were wild, totally wild and weird. So it made sense to cast the main characters as the kids, the now adult kids of my main characters from the first two books, because it's always more credible to have people in their 20s be more naive and stupid than people in their 50s.
Right.
So,
and running around the world and doing all that kind of stuff. Sure. Well, what is it like to have Charlie and Margaret sort of on the sidelines after they've been front and center for two books?
Well, it was a little frustrating because I love them so much, but also, having been in my 20s and now being in my 50s, somebody in their 50s making stupid mistakes and hanging out with dumb people, you would just maybe not have that much respect for. But somebody in their 20s doing it, you can understand it, because when you're 20s, that's when you make dumb mistakes and dumb decisions, because you're just learning about how the world works and you're more inclined to be taken in by evil yet charming people, which both Ike and Lucy are in this book. So I missed them a little bit, although they're still in the book. I had also gave me the opportunity to invent two completely new people who had shades of their parents in them, but were also new. So, Charlie is a World War II veteran and heroic and a strong moral character raised, he's the part of the greatest generation. Ike is similar in a lot of ways, but he's, kind of the Vietnam generation, although a little younger. He didn't serve in Vietnam. He serves in a military escapade that goes wildly wrong in Lebanon. And so his sense of service is very different than his dad's, because, he sees what happens to the Vietnam veterans. He has this horrible experience in Lebanon. And so his experience is the exact opposite. His dad fought for the freedom of the world, and he sees the way that the U.S. government uses the military in the other side of the coin. Lucy has the same feminist goals as her mom, but she also has a completely different desire she wants to be a journalist, as opposed to her mom as a zoologist. So that gave me some opportunities to comment on tabloid journalism, which, arose in a major way in the United States in the 70s with the Son of Sam murders, and the rise of tabloid journalism with the New York Post and the New York Daily News, and the rise of Rupert Murdoch. So that was fun. And also it was fun because Lucy is probably the character of the martyrs who is the most like me, as opposed to Charlie or Margaret or Ike. Lucy is, a young, ambitious reporter, which I used to be, young at least, but I'm still an ambitious journalist.
Yeah.
And so I got to imbue Lucy with all of my most annoying habits, which, I think made her, identifiable to a lot of my journalist friends who have read the book. Like, she's the one that corrects people, when they misuse the word ironic. And, she's the one that, if they're misinterpreting that Robert Frost poem about the paths diverging in the wood, she will tell the people, you're misunderstanding that poem, etc. So that's me and how annoying I am. And so that's Lucy too.
So when you talk about young people hanging out with dumb people, so I immediately thought of Evel Knievel being in the book. I assume that's who you mean as the dumb person.
Well, charming but evil, I think, is what I meant. Evil and charming, but I meant it EVIL, not EVEL, which is But yeah, no, I mean, like.
But Evel Knievel plays a large role in this, because this is where Ike. This is after this botched operation, and he's on the run, if you will.
He goes AWOL.
Goes to work for Evel Knievel.
Ike is a motorcycle enthusiast. He goes AWOL. He's in Bethesda Naval Hospital after this operation that goes terribly wrong. And even worse, the U.S. military, the Pentagon, sells to the American people the idea that this was some heroic, amazing adventure, when it was not. It was a huge snafu. And he goes AWOL, and through some connections ends up in Montana working on the pit crew of Evel Knievel, because he admires Evel Knievel, because he's obviously a motorcycle stuntman, and gets to know Evel Knievel, who is this quintessentially American character. You don't have to be an Evel Knievel fan to see the charm and the degree to which Evel Knievel is an American archetype. And by that, I mean, there is something just in his bravado, in his salesmanship, in his showmanship, that is P.T. Barnum, that is Muhammad Ali, that is Donald Trump, that is just this character that always seems to be in our popular culture, of somebody through sheer force of will and charisma, part of, maybe even Matt Gaetz is that today, the Congressman Matt Gaetz, just somebody who is on our TV screens and everybody is just watching him or her, and cannot get enough. And Evel Knievel was that in the 1970s. Not a particularly gifted motorcyclist, but there he was on the cover of Rolling Stone, on the cover of Sports Illustrated, jumping over Snake River Canyon, or attempting attempting to do so. And Ike ends up with him, and to talk about the 70s, but also talk about leaders and followers, and how it happens that celebrities like that get followers, and also just have fun with the notion of celebrity, because Evel Knievel at that point in his career was kind of flailing around.
Right.
He had a film that had just come out called Viva Evil that was a huge flop. And
With Gene Kelly. How did that happen?
well, you throw money at these people and they end up in the film, But yeah, no, Gene Kelly was in it. It was yeah, horrible movie, absolutely awful.
Awful.
I mean, people don't remember how big a deal he was. I mean, there was a movie about him, a biopic starring George Hamilton
Right.
as Evel Knievel. I mean, he was a huge deal. The jump over Snake River Canyon in 1974 was probably the first pay-per-view event. It was not on TV. He cashed in with this pay-per-view event, and it was a very unsuccessful jump, but a very successful financially event.
So you're about a year and a half younger than I am, and Evel Knievel was like the biggest thing in my childhood life that I remember, of the toys and the bike. And you were always out there with the Evel Knievel bike. Huffy made one, and you would jump, and of course you had the wind up toy that you'd let go and it would go over the jump. So were you at that stage of fandom?
I will be completely honest. No,
Yeah.
his charm eluded me. I did not. I knew of him. One of my friends had the lunchbox. And I think one or two of my friends had the wind-up motorcycle, but I was not an ABC Wide World of Sports family. We didn't watch ABC Wide World of Sports, where he really appeared a lot. So his charm, it wasn't that I didn't like him. He wasn't like a character. Like I was I was a $6 Million Man kid. I was
Right.
a Super Friends kid. It wasn't that I was not enjoying junky pop culture. I was, but he was not part of my life. In fact, it was Jimmy Kimmel who told me I should put Evel Knievel in the book, because he knew I was working on a third book, and he knew I was doing the 70s, and I was at he has a fishing lodge out in Idaho, and he's decorated it with all this. He's a huge Evel Knievel fan, and he's decorated with all this Evel Knievel stuff. He has the pinball machine. He has the Sports Illustrated cover, the Rolling Stone cover.
Yeah.
Your autographed picture, et cetera, et cetera. And I was just like, what is the deal with you and Evel Knievel? The lodge is not far from the Snake River Canyon jump where that took place. And he said, no, you gotta look at this character. He'd be good for your book. And I said, I mean, he was just kind of like a meathead, wasn't he? And like, why? He said, you gotta watch. And he recommended this documentary called Being Evil that Johnny Knoxville helped produce. And he was right that he was this fascinating character, not a good guy.
No.
And it makes a horrible guy. And once you learn about him, I read a really good book about him. Once you learn about him, you realize why it is that his life rights have been out there in Hollywood, jumping from celebrity to celebrity, and nobody's made the movie because you can't. He's a horrible guy, and he starts off a horrible guy, and he lives as a horrible guy, and he dies as a horrible guy. Like, there's no redemption in the third act. I mean, he's just always bad, anti-Semitic, and cheats on his wife, and he's a drunk and all this stuff. But he's a great foil for in my book, because my characters can play off him, but still just this quintessentially American character.
As you say, you use him as a foil. This is interesting to me because I was reminded throughout the book, and this can be for really all of these characters and all of your books, really, that these are things that are accurate. There is, while fictionalized, and to my knowledge, Evel Knievel never talked about running for president, and yet the times, the places, the moments, that all is real. You put them in very as far as the dates and times, that's accurate.
Yeah, and in fact, one of the first scenes in the book with Evel Knievel is him in Chicago at this ridiculous event where he's jumping over a tank of sharks. He's jumping sharks, and he does this 8 months before Fonz does it on Happy Days.
Yeah. Now, see, I thought that's where that came from. I didn't realize until I read your book that was that he was.
Well, I assume that
trying to jumping sharks.
I think. Well, I don't know that they're related. I think everybody was just jumping sharks because of Jaws and how successful Jaws was, and I think jumping the shark is a phrase from due to Happy Days. Although Henry Winkler, were he on the program right now, would remind you that Happy Days was still the #1 show on TV for like 5 years after it's quote unquote jumped the shark. But in any case, yeah, that was a real event in Chicago. It's in the book too, and it really is kind of like, I mean, 1977, the year in which my novel takes place, is really the year that Evel Knievel's career goes horribly wrong, and it starts with he's no longer on ABC. He's doing this sports spectacular for CBS, and he has an accident in rehearsals and isn't even able to do the sports spectacular. And that is true. It doesn't happen the way I have it happening, which is this confrontation between Ike, my character, and him. Right. But it is true that he does have an accident in rehearsals and breaks a bunch of bones. And then the year does end with him going to prison, Evel Knievel. So, I mean, that some of that, the outlines of it are true. But yeah, I mean, one of the things that's fun when you write these when I write historical fiction, is to find out what really happened and then use those real events as well. It's like, they have the basic premise of the 3-act structure for any drama is Act 1, chase your hero up a tree. Act 2, throw rocks at your hero. Act 3, get your hero out of the tree.
Right.
So one of the things that's fun for me is have 1977 as one of the people throwing rocks at my heroes. So, you have 1977 is the son of Sam, murderer, and the New York City blackout, and Studio 54, and Elvis dying, and all these things, throwing rocks at Ike and Lucy in the tree, in addition to, the other plot twists that I come up with.
And then as far as the political side, Jimmy Carter's president of the United States, and we're just out of Watergate, and Charlie, Senator Charlie, is
He's a senator now, for those paying attention.
Yes, is dealing with all of that and trying to figure out where the country is going.
Yeah, poor Charlie. He's a moderate Republican from when the series starts in 1953, 54. He's an Eisenhower Republican, a House member, and very proud of being an interventionist, strong on foreign policy, pro civil rights Republican. And here in 1977, he was in favor of impeaching Nixon in the House. He is now a senator because his independent streak was rewarded by the voters of New York, and he's trying to figure out what place there is for him in the Republican Party of 1977 as the Republican Party tries to figure out what it is. That's also a theme of the book, is like, what is the Republican Party in 1977 post-Nixon, which is kind of a theme of what's going on right now. What is the Republican Party now? What does it stand for? And, there's kind of a myth that after Nixon resigned, that the party was eager to see him go and everybody was just ready to move on. And that's not true. That's really not how the Republican Party was. And in fact, Larry Hogan Sr., Larry Hogan Jr. is the 2-term governor of Maryland,
right?
A Republican. His father was a House member, and unlike Charlie, my character, a real member of the House Judiciary Committee from Maryland, who voted in favor of the articles of impeachment against Nixon, a very brave and difficult thing to do. And he ran statewide. I think he was running for governor or senator. I forget which one it is, maybe Senate, but he lost in the primary. He was punished by the Republican voters in Maryland because he supported the articles of impeachment against Nixon. And this is after Nixon had resigned. So the fact that a Republican turned against Nixon was still punished by Republican voters, even after Nixon resigned, even after it was clear he was a crook. So it's not as though it was like finger snapped, Nixon resigned, everybody acknowledged he was a crook and a bad guy. It took a while for this stuff to, work itself out. And by the way, Roger Stone still has a tattoo of Nixon on his back. food for thought.
There's that. We've been talking a lot about Ike, and let's talk about Lucy, who is Ike's sister, a reporter, and is going to work for this British media family, which is very Murdoch-like.
Very directly based on the Murdochs. In fact, some of the lines that Max Lyon, who is the media magnate who has come to the United States to start a media empire after conquering newspapers in Australia, UK, New Zealand, etc. Some of the lines he says to justify his tabloid journalism are things that Rupert Murdoch has said. I just took them, stole them, gave them to him. I mean, I didn't steal them. I gave him credit in my endnotes at the end of the book. But yes, directly attributed to Rupert Murdoch, gave them to Max Lyon.
When you look at that, you see how this is someone who revitalized newspapers.
Yeah, look, I mean, one of the things about Rupert Murdoch, I didn't want Max Lyon to be a mustache twirling villain. I wanted him to be believable. First of all, one of the things about him is his first toehold into American media. This is Rupert Murdoch, the real person, not Max Lyon, my fictitious version. Is while the first part, the first newspapers to go in the United States are, and some people might be too young to even remember this, but like it used to be, there would be a morning newspaper and then there would be an afternoon newspaper, right, like in different cities across the country.
In our city, it was the Enquirer in the morning, the Bulletin in the afternoon.
There you go.
Yeah.
So in San Antonio, which is where Murdoch got his start, the afternoon newspaper survived, whereas the afternoon newspapers all over the country were dying. Now they survived because he pushed sensationalism, killer bees and murders and all sorts of stuff. But they survived. People would buy them. So there was something to what he was doing that worked. Some of the justifications I give to him and his family when they are convincing Lucy why their way of journalism is better than the stuffy Washington Post or the stuffy New York Times, I think are legitimate arguments. For example, if you go back and look at how the New York Times covered the Son of Sam serial killer who was terrorizing the outer boroughs of New York City, I think it's fair to say that they were treating it like an unimportant local crime story, which is probably underserving their readers, given the fact that there was a serial killer killing New Yorkers. At the same time, like, you know, it's also difficult to argue that the New York Post and the New York Daily News weren't sensationalizing the Son of Sam murderer. You know, probably somewhere in between is the responsible way to cover this. In any case, I wanted to have Max Lyon, I wanted to give him his due in terms of the arguments in favor of a more populist kind of way of appealing to readers and viewers, because the truth is the tabloidization of news to a degree is not just seen at the New York Post or Fox. It's anything you see that where newspapers or radio or TV is trying to get your attention more than they would have been trying 50 years ago. Now, that said, what Lucy has to deal with that I think is really dangerous, that Fox does and the New York Post does to an unprofessional and hideous degree, is lying or shading the truth or pushing the headlines beyond what is justifiable. And that's what she has to deal with in the book. Which
is sort of, I mean, like how you get to a Dominion lawsuit.
Exactly. Yeah. And not just that lawsuit, the Seth Rich, or when the New York Post put two people on the cover after the Boston Marathon bombing and insinuated they might have been the bombers, and they had to settle with them. I mean, there is a long, hideous history of Murdoch media enterprises doing this in order to sell papers, and it's just gotten worse and worse and worse. So it's the $787.5 million settlement with Dominion is just the latest example of it. But I have Lucy is on the trail of a serial killer, and there is legitimately somebody killing innocent people in D.C. in this story, which is made up, but it didn't happen. And the Lyon family wants Lucy to turn this into their own Son of Sam killer, and they start goosing her headlines and pushing her reporting to places where she's not comfortable. She becomes part of and complicit in the sensationalizing of this story. And the biggest compliment I've gotten is from some friends of mine who used to work at the New York Post saying, "Where did you get that from? Because that's exactly how it happens. Did you talk to people at the New York Post?"
Right.
And I said, "No, it's just not difficult to figure out how it would happen. It's easy to see how it would happen." And, they said, "Well, you got it exactly right." So that was fun.
It seems like one of the things in the book is that that we also see about this time in the late 70s. Again, this is post Watergate, but this is really where we start to see the mistrust of government. I guess we always had the anger, but that real mistrust.
Well, this is the post Watergate, post Vietnam era, and that's a potent 1-2 punch. Nixon lying to the American people about a break-in. Nixon and his henchmen ordering a break-in in the offices of the Democratic National Committee headquarters, lying about it, slush funds. I mean, think about how insane it is that his attorney general and chief of staff went to prison. I mean, really crazy.
Do you see yourself in advancing the series of going to another decade, writing more about these two characters?
I have an idea for a fourth book that would take place in the 80s on a cruise to Normandy on the 40th anniversary of the D-Day invasion. But I have to be honest, there's a couple nonfiction projects that I really want to work on. Yeah, but I love the Martyr family, and I want to come back to them, and I just I think I might take a little bit of a break.
Well, and for anyone who hasn't read The Outpost, which was your book, which is incredible nonfiction, it was just a terrific. You did an amazing job on that book.
Thank you so much.
Jake Tapper's new book is All the Demons Are Here. It is published by Little Brown. Thanks to our producer, Sarah LeDuc. Write to us at book@wamc.org. The latest on national productions programs is available via the Airwaves newsletter at wamc.org and on social media at WAMC Radio. Bookmark us for next week, and thanks for listening. For The Book Show, I'm Joe Donahue.